was certainly very generous, and thank you very much. Tim Russert, one of my heroes, and we miss him in this election season. Well, good morning, everyone. What a pleasure to be with you here. You know, the Miami Beach Chamber of Commerce is a force for good in your community and in the larger community, and I salute you, and I especially salute my good, great friend, Alan Lips, who is now the new chair. Only Alan could get me up to be here after I worked until 11:30 last night. And I also want to publicly thank Alan for keeping the IRS from my door for the last maybe 15 years that Alan has so expertly handled our taxes. What a night it was last night. I know that most of you were probably up until at least 11, having watched the vice presidential debate. I think that, you know, if I had a choice between that and Monday Night Football or something, I'd watch the debate. I thought the debate was excellent because it was a real debate. It wasn't kind of a faux debate like we had with the presidential candidates last week. That may change on Tuesday when they meet again, but these are two knowledgeable, feisty, but civil men who I think I have interviewed both. I've interviewed Congressman Ryan a couple of weeks ago. It's kind of maybe not a big point, but when he came into the room at the JW Marriott, he came in and he said, "You must be Michael, I'm Paul." And there wasn't any kind of false modesty about that. This is a very approachable, very smart, very conservative, but a principled guy. And I happen to like Joe Biden personally. I think that he is, you know, tremendously gregarious and maybe speaks a little too freely. But I thought that he was excellent last night. I thought that Ryan was excellent. And I think the beneficiary of that exchange last night was the small d democratic process. I only wish that the first presidential debate had been at that matter. It's still kind of me, as it might be to you, open the question about what happened to President Obama. You know, it kind of reminds me of the time that Joaquin Phoenix was on the David Letterman show, and finally, after many minutes of embarrassment, Letterman turned to him and said, "Well, I wish you could have been here tonight." The president told Diane Sawyer 2 nights ago, "Well, I had a bad night." Well, he certainly did. And when I saw him yesterday at the University of Miami, he was in very good form and aggressive. And yet, you've got to be aggressive when it counts. I mean, you have to be on your game when 70 million Americans are watching, and to his credit, Governor Romney was on his game. I just thought it made such a difference, and all of us picked up our Miami Herald this morning or watched the news, and you see that Romney is now up in Florida by 7 points. Actually, that is more like 10 or 11 points because for the last 7 or 8 weeks, the president has been up in Florida by 2, 3, 4 points. Not much, but enough to have been, I think, the genuine leader. And what this showed me was that there were a lot of people who were not firm in their commitment, a lot of people who could be persuaded. The Wall Street Journal did a poll the other day, and they found that 11% of Americans are not firmly committed to one candidate or another. But that poll was taken before the debate, and what we saw was a lot of people turned around and said, "Yes, I'm going to vote for Governor Romney." Well, is it over? No, of course it's not over. It's going to go on until November 6th. When, parenthetically, I have to say, if you haven't gotten or asked for an absentee ballot, or when you go to vote early, or if you should vote on Election Day, you and everybody else is going to discover the most monstrous overstuffed ballot I have ever seen. In Miami-Dade County, it's 12 pages long. And people are going to go into the voting booth, those who are kind of naive and, you know, they're going to go in and they are going to be utterly confused. The lines of people at the polling places is going to be long because people are going to go in there and I think spend at least 10 minutes to 15 minutes, if they're scrupulous, trying to understand the ballot. And not to get ahead of myself, but one of the reasons that they're going to be confused, we can thank our state legislators. They have put amendments, constitutional amendments on the ballot in their full form. They didn't put the summaries as they usually do because they are, excuse me, pissed off at the state Supreme Court, which has sent back a number of constitutional amendments. Senator Margolis could explain this better than I could, because the Supreme Court has said the wording of various constitutional amendments has been misleading. Well, they're still misleading. There's Amendment 8 there, talks about the Religious Freedom Amendment, when in fact it is just the opposite. And I think also for anyone who believes in a woman's right to choose, or even in just the general principle of privacy, should be concerned, because that amendment would limit the privacy amendment in the Constitution of the state of Florida, which former Senator Jack Gordon, Win Margolis, many others worked on, and which I think is a cornerstone of how we should approach government, which is that government cannot arbitrarily move into our lives, and certainly not into our bedrooms. And so for what it's worth, I'm going to vote against all these constitutional amendments. It won't take me long to vote on them. But anybody who goes in there and looks at these and really does try to understand them is going to be confused. And again, we can thank the state legislature. Let me say a few words about some other races, and I certainly want to hear your questions too. This new poll is certainly going to have an effect on some down-ticket races. And I don't think, however, it's going to have that much of an effect on the Bill Nelson, Connie Mack Senate race. Bill Nelson, how do I say this gracefully, has not been a particularly starstruck or spectacular senator, but he's a solid guy. He is certainly a moderate. He is not a wild-eyed liberal. Connie Mack is trying to use the same tactic that his father, a wonderful man, Connie Mack, the second, one of the nicest men ever in politics, was a very good senator for the state of Florida. And he beat, if you remember, Buddy McKay, Lieutenant Governor Buddy McKay, with the phrase, "Hey, buddy, you're a liberal." Well, Connie Mack III is trying to say, "Hey, Bill, you're a liberal." Well, if Bill Nelson is a liberal, then I'm going to start speaking Farsi tomorrow morning. I mean, this is absurd. Bill Nelson is cautious. He's moderate. He's ahead, I think, in the latest poll by 12 or 13 points, and I think Bill Nelson probably is going to win. Let me tell you about a couple of other congressional races. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and we are in the 23rd Congressional District now. Debbie is a force of nature. She is just has a lot of clout in Washington. She is challenged by a very nice woman from Hollywood named Karen Harrington, who actually came within, I think, was it 18 percentage points 2 years ago of Debbie, but I think Debbie is going to win this race going away. A question for her is, what does she do when she leaves the post of the Democratic National Chairperson? I think that she's got larger ambitions, but she could stay in the House as long as she liked. Another congressional race that's been of real interest to me, even though it's way down south, and is the one involving Congressman David Rivera, who was running against Joe Garcia. He used to live down on Bayshore, down in South Beach. David Rivera is in serious trouble with federal authorities. It appears to me, and I've done reporting, the Miami Herald has done excellent reporting, that he, for reasons which are still unknown, or at least unclear, that he encouraged a Democrat, a 35-year-old hotel accountant named Justin Lamar Sternad, to run in the August primary, and he, David, and one of his girlfriends, a woman named Ana Allegro, likes to sit around naked with a gun and, fired a shot or two at her former husband one time. Miss Allegro ran the campaign for Mr. Sternad, and David appears to have funded that campaign to the tune of about $64,000. But when Sternad filed his reports with the Federal Elections Commission, again, it appears he lied about that. And guess what? You lawyers and CPAs in the room, you can't do that. I mean, that is a crime. And what's going to happen is that Mr. Sternad, I know, has appeared before the grand jury, and he's not going down for this alone. I'm sure he is saying that he was put up to this with the help of Ms. Allegro and Mr. Rivera, and I think that he will be flipped and he will testify against both of them. Next Sunday, may I say, you might find it interesting, I'm sorry to self-promote my show, but Congressman Rivera finally has said, I will appear on your show. And he wants to talk about the economy and everything else. And I said, well, great, we may get to those questions, but first we're going to have to talk about your problems with the law. I think there's another a county commission race that very much affects you, and I don't know if the chamber takes a position in these things, but District 3 encompasses Miami Beach, and Bruno Barrero has been the commissioner for 14 years, a very long time. Those of you who believe that maybe term limits are a good thing, I'm not sure. Well, he told me the other day he does believe in term limits, but I guess not for himself. And Louis Garcia, the former Miami Beach Police Fire Chief and City Commissioner, obviously, is a candidate. And I know the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce sort of put their backing behind him. Another issue that I think is very important to this community on the ballot is the $1.2 billion school bond issue. And again, Ellen, I don't know if your chamber has taken a position. I certainly believe, and if you have been following the editorials in the Herald, or if you've got a child in school or a grandchild, the public schools have deferred serious maintenance and renovations and construction for years because Alberto Carvalho, who in my view has done an outstanding job as the superintendent, they have found ways to, even though they can't use capital improvement money for everything, but they have used their money to make sure that teachers stay in the classroom, that there is art and music, the things that are in addition to the core curriculum. And school maintenance has been deferred for 4 or 5 years. And a lot of the schools in Miami-Dade County desperately need to be upgraded, they need to be fixed. And it seems to me that the real question there is oversight. The 1988 bond issue, for about the same amount of money, most of it was spent all right, but then there were millions that were spent, were misspent. Miami Northwestern Senior High School, I believe, cost at the end twice as much as it was projected to cost. I think it cost in the end something like $77 million. It's the most expensive school ever built in the state of Florida. And I'm not saying that the people in that district don't need a nice school, but there was no serious oversight of the money. Alberto Carvalho says that he is going to appoint, he and the board are going to appoint a 23-member oversight committee, and they better be serious. And if that's really a serious group, then I would say, I mean, what the heck? I mean, I know that my wife and I, my wife's a former school teacher, we're more than willing to pay 20 or 30 bucks a year so that children in Miami-Dade County and teachers and staff can work in safe, hospitable, a good environment. And I think that the community, even in these difficult economic times, I think will get behind that. So those are some thoughts about what's on the political horizon as I see it. These are really great times. I know in Miami Beach you are about to select a new city manager. Aaron tells me that there is one candidate who looks pretty good to him, and if she looks good to Aaron, then I think it looks pretty good to me. And then you've got your convention center expansion and renovation. Both Louis Garcia, Bruno Barrero have told me that they would support that, wholeheartedly. So I just simply close by saying there was a period in my life in a kind of a previous marriage where I lived on Pine Tree Drive. I love Miami Beach. I still do. I live in Aventura next to my friend Alan. But I have just fond feelings for Miami Beach. I think that it is one of the great communities in this country. And I salute you. I think that it's a community where you can live anywhere on the beach, mid-beach or the north part of the beach, or if you're very hip, live down there in the south, or if you're very rich, live in one of the condominiums way south. Wherever you live, you have a great community, and part of the reason is you. So more power to you in the Miami Beach Chamber. And thanks for Jerry Levin for the job you do too, Jerry.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, I know we have some questions here.
Questions? All right, well, I'll go closest. Mr. David Haber.
Yes,
Nice
David.
to see you, Michael.
Thanks, David.
My question is, how do you think President Obama is going to deal with the public relations debacle of the Benghazi terrorist attack in light of 2 weeks of him and his administration, ambassador to the UN, his spokesperson saying it was because of a video when I believe it was the State Department stated yesterday under oath, the Undersecretary, that they knew within 24 hours that it was a terrorist attack. It's a nightmare for him.
It is a nightmare, and I thought that, in fact, Congressman Ryan got off to a incredibly good start last night by pointing out that the administration for a couple of weeks, and then they sent Ambassador Rice out from the UN, who's an impressive lady. I interviewed her a couple of months ago, and they sent her out on the Sunday talk shows saying, well, this was a spontaneous thing, when now, finally, weeks later, and I thought that, frankly, Vice President Biden's explanation last night was not very compelling. When he said, well, the intelligence community simply was wrong and we repeated what they said. That's a pathetic response. I personally would have preferred some candor on the part of Biden if he had said, we messed up. We were under the impression, and how could he have said, they didn't ask for extra security, when in fact we know they asked for extra security, and that was part of the testimony before Congress. This was a bad mistake. I don't know that it was a fatal mistake. I think that the way to cure this, David, is for the president to simply come clean. I mean, don't try to temporize and give people excuses. We know BS when we hear it. I'm not saying that Vice President Biden was giving us BS last night, and if there is a genuine investigation going on, great. But of course, by the time the investigative body issues its findings, the election is going to be well over.
Do you think that journalists are going to really hold their feet to the fire and ask the tough questions?
I hope so, and I think they are. While overall I'm not a huge fan of Fox News because they're not fair and balanced, and MSNBC is a little too liberal, but I've got to say that some of the hosts on Fox News have been good in staying with this issue, and the Wall Street Journal. But it takes more than that. I think that it will remain an issue. By the way, could I simply take a moment and acknowledge the presence of my friend Gwen Margolis? I like to say Gwen Margolis knows more about government than I will ever forget. Gwen is a champion in so many ways, a wonderful person, first woman president of the Florida Senate. She and a number of other like-minded people worked hard, Republicans and Democrats, for about 20 years to work on privacy issues, on women's rights, on civil rights, on education, on improving the environment. And in my view, many of those advances in that era, from the 70s into the 80s and the mid-90s, under Republican and Democratic governors, a lot of those advances have been rolled back in the last few years, and I find it regrettable. But Gwen, I salute you and thank you for your service.
Now I do turn. Any other questions out there? I know we got some other questions in the room. Anybody? Right over here. Okay, great. Maggie.
Hi.
Good morning.
Morning.
Do you think that the Obama campaign can regain their momentum that they've lost in the past week or so before the election?
I think they can, yes. The answer is I think they can regain a lot of, or some of their momentum, but a lot of it has to do with the next two debates. You know, the conventional wisdom said debates don't really matter all that much. Well, we've just seen that the first one did. And the next one will be different because it's a town hall style debate. And Governor Romney and Obama, Mr. Obama, both do pretty well in that setting. But it's not like, forgive me, I don't think journalists need to get ahead of the candidates, but I thought Martha Raddatz last night was absolutely excellent because she set exactly the right kind of limits about when they were going to get out of control or out of her control. They kind of reeled it back in a very civil way. Well, let's see what Candy Crowley of CNN does. And then in the third debate up here at Lynn University in Boca later this month. And, you know, a lot of it depends, frankly, on the president's ability to distill his message. I mean, part of, in my view, the problem with the Obama administration is that while the president was elected in large part because he wasn't George W. Bush, he was elected because of his eloquence. When he spoke during the campaign 4 years ago, I think that the entire country felt, you know, we were lifted up by the rhetoric, and we have been let down by the failure to meet some of the promises of the rhetoric. I think that the president has to say more to the American people than, we've done okay for 4 years, let's stay on the same track, and I think we're going to do a little bit better in the next 4. I mean, is that really the message? And if I may say, while I'm being critical, is the message from Governor Romney simply, I'm a great manager and I can manage this enterprise and solve our economic problems better than President Obama. You know, we do have in Florida a governor who sold himself to the people of Florida as a great manager who could run this state and put people back to work. Well, we all want people to be put back to work, but management is not the same thing as leadership. What we need in this country is leadership. We need somebody, you know, David Brooks of the New York Times he writes lots of great columns. I'm a big admirer of his. What he said right before both conventions essentially was, I want to hear either Governor Romney or President Obama give us a big idea. Give us, John F. Kennedy said, we're going to go to the moon, and we're going to do it in the next 10 years, and we're going to do this. It excited us. It made us feel good about our prospects. In my view, the presidential campaign has been small ball. We haven't heard enough big ideas or a big idea, I think, from either candidate. But I'm kind of digressing, forgive me, but the answer to the question is, yes, he can regain his momentum, but boy, he's going to have to focus himself and really move forward and once again capture the imagination of voters. Alan, another question? My friend Mark Henderson.
Hey, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
Let's bring it back from Washington back up to the state capitol. This is an issue I think that the senator probably knows about as well. In addition to having all this junk on the ballot of 12 pages, which is kind of asinine if you ask me, excuse the language, ladies. What's your take as it relates to the retention of the 3 Supreme Court justices?
That's an excellent question, Mark, and I think that that's really kind of a no-brainer. Justices Parenti and Fred Lewis and Peggy Quince have all been rated at about 90% by the Florida Bar. They are extremely qualified, and they should be retained. And the reason why there is a campaign to not retain them, you know, every 6 years we vote on appellate judges in the state, is that the Koch brothers, along with former House Speaker Dean Cannon and other members of the legislature, are angry with them. I mean, former House Speaker Cannon was so angry that they had rejected 2 years ago the ballot amendment to not make Florida part of the Affordable Care Act. That was sent back because the language, all the justices, not just these 3, they sent it back and said, this cannot go on the ballot. That angered Dean Cannon so much that he said, and I was at the news conference, well, let's have 2 branches of the state Supreme Court, one for civil, one for criminal. I mean, it reminded me of Franklin Roosevelt trying to pack the Supreme Court in what, 1937 or something. I mean, come on. These are 3 qualified state Supreme Court justices, and there's every reason to vote to keep them on the court, in my opinion. How about another? Anybody, any lawyers out there want to disagree with that? Or you're welcome to.
Come on, guys, this is an opportunity here. I know we got some questions. Anyone? We want to talk a little bit about nuclear Iran? That's a little issue. I don't know.
I have a question. Michael.
Yeah.
The word taxes is just a dirty word, it seems, in politics. And what I've been hearing, listening to, is that a lot of states and cities are cash strapped. In Florida, for example, there is, again, statewide, the inclination to get elected to say, I'm going to reduce taxes. With the pressures on the local municipalities wherever in Florida, what's your view on the almost lie, to a certain extent, to get elected by saying I'm going to reduce taxes when, at the end of the day, services are actually going to be reduced? We're talking police, fire, etc. And the negative externality or negative economic impact is higher crime. So any thoughts on that?
Well, what was it? Oliver Wendell Holmes said, taxes are the price we pay for civilization. Sometimes maybe we seem like we have too much civilization. Nobody likes to pay taxes. I thought Paul Ryan was pretty good on the tax issue last night when he talked about the tax rates. I think that your point is a very good one, David, in that the government closest to us are municipal and county governments, City of Miami Beach, Miami-Dade County. You know, they're dependent, obviously, on ad valorem taxes. By the way, can I just digress for a second? I remember a couple of years ago at a Miami-Dade County budget hearing, and there was a reporter from another station. I'm sorry, this sounds a little snarky, but they were discussing, the county commission was discussing the ad valorem tax rate, and this reporter turned to me and said, "Who is this ad valorem they're talking about? Do you know him?" And I'm not saying I know a lot about government, but I do know what ad valorem taxes are. I think it is a quandary because government services, police, fire, water and sewer, all the things that we need are dependent, and when our home values went down, it was harder for these services. Thankfully, Miami-Dade County, which used to have 31,000 or so county employees, now they're down to about 27,000, and it probably might even, should even get a little lower than that. We all feel overtaxed, but the next time you feel really overtaxed, go to France, let's say, or you know, some of the Western European countries. I don't know, in Finland or in Sweden and Norway, the taxes are 50–55% of their income. I think that I have kept you long enough. I want to say thank you very much. You're really. One more. Okay. Yes, Jerry.
I wanted to ask you, you know, from your perspective, since you're in the same business, to compare and contrast the moderators of the presidential debate, Jim Lehrer and Martha last night. I mean, things seem to get a little bit away from Jim. And you know, if you have any comments and compare and contrast the styles, I'm sure they were both difficult to handle.
Well, I have moderated a couple of statewide debates for governor and U.S. senator, and I can say, and a lot of local ones, that to do it well is not easy. And Jim Lehrer, who did a lot of wonderful debates, should have declined this one because I think that he wasn't ready. I like this new format where they're able to talk to each other and have more interaction. I think that he simply let it get out of his grasp, and Martha Raddatz, every time it began to kind of slip away, she very nicely reeled it in. So more power to her, and all I can say is think about yourself standing up in front of 70 million people and having a conversation. I thought one of the remarkable things about it last night was you got the feeling, didn't you? I did, that these were three people sitting together having this conversation. There was a sense of intimacy and intensity about their conversation, especially the candidates, and I think a lot of that is because of the very good job she did. Thanks so much, appreciate it.